What will the program be for today?
Yeah. So, so I think that you had just a few more things that you wanted to fix up on the model, but then I think a really good way to keep going today would be to start building some tests around the model that you've got and start to evolve that out into code.
Yeah, because I've still been working on the model, and I keep working on it. But my feeling is that I don't have enough experience with the underlying things to judge performance and to judge authentication issues.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I cannot make decisions. And so I thought for myself, okay, this is the last time we really want to talk about the model. And then I should really attack the testing and Jinaga to explore more in depth how it works. Because I remember from the book that some of these patterns where if it exists, if it doesn't exist, and then you get performance problems. I forgot it. I should look it up again. But especially with this period pattern, I cannot estimate is it going to work in that way or is it going to work in another way. So I think I should just finalize the model and then let it be the way it is. Try that one, do the test, implement some basic functionality with Jinaga, and start experiencing what can work and what cannot work.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because if we just keep iterating on the model and don't get started, there's really nothing that's telling us whether this is correct or not, or if it's going to solve problems one way or another. And yeah, I think we've gotten down to the point where it's kind of my intuition and your domain experience, and we're trying to bring those two things together and evaluate the model versus if we just code it up and write some queries and simulate some realistic scenarios, which we can do in tests, then at that point that really validates that yes, this captures what we want it to capture.
So I think again we go, this time I put it in code directly, got rid of the toolbar, and then we will just shift like that.
Okay, yeah.
And I gave it some color. The blocks is just to focus, to keep things together.
Okay, yeah.
So the green block is everything that has to do with a task. And the blue and the pink one, the blue is unit of work, and the pink is unit of leave. So remember, we had work and we had private hours.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And we wanted to separate that because otherwise we were going to use that a task that was that had no real customer.
Right. Yes.
But perhaps, is it readable like this?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So perhaps let's start with this. So we have a supplier, and now I added, as we discussed last time, I added a user. Yeah, here. And then the user has a successor dispatcher and also has a successor worker. Okay. Dispatcher for the moment is not really used yet. Worker is used because, for example, everything. So a task. Yeah, let's first go back to a task here. So a task was something that can have tools. Task was something that have consumables. A task, you do some work for a client. You go to a location, to a yard. There is a schedule and a description. So a task, well, it will be linked to supplier with a period pattern. Also there, I'm not too sure. Am I going to work year, date? For the moment, I think I'm just going to do it by month, year, month, in one combination. So, for example, 2021-1 for January.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that's 25 years times 12, 300. So you have a connection with 300 things, and that's just up to my age of 78. So
yeah.
that should be fine.
Yeah.
But we will have to try. Then the task that will be created, because that's another thing I missed last time. Most of the tasks are created by a dispatcher and assigned to a worker by a dispatcher as well. But imagine the dispatcher is on leave, or something urgent has to be done late in the evening. The worker himself can create tasks for himself on his smartphone. So he can create the task and he can assign it. That's why I wrote here created by and assigned by.
Okay, right. Right, yeah.
But that means that this created by goes back to the user, not the dispatcher, not to the worker. And assigned by as well.
Right.
Does that have consequences for authentication, for security?
That it would if it depends on how you answer this question. So by virtue of the fact that that a person is a worker, do they have all of the capabilities of a dispatcher in creating and assigning tasks?
Normally yes, because a dispatcher is connected to a supplier and a worker is also connected to a supplier. So
right.
The user himself, if he's not employed by the supplier, he cannot create tasks for that supplier.
Right. Okay. So so then I don't think there is a security concern in that respect. So that relationship with the supplier is an interesting part of that. So we'll have to think through that and see if that is the case. So if you think about dispatcher and worker as being roles within a supplier, then a user can perform both of those roles within the same supplier. And so if you had answered the question that no, a worker doesn't just automatically get the ability to assign and create tasks, then I would suggest, or we would lean in on those roles and say, okay, let the dispatcher role be something explicit that you give to a user, even if that user is already a worker, so that they can perform those actions. And in that case, tying everything back to the dispatcher makes sense because they have to have the dispatcher role before they can create the task or assign the task. Given the fact that just any user associated with the supplier is able to perform those actions, then I think tying it back to the user makes sense. With that caveat that you just mentioned of the user doesn't capture the relationship with the supplier. It's role and dispatcher that capture the relationship with supplier. So so that tie back doesn't constrain it to a user within the supplier. And so for that, then we have to think about authorization rules. So an authorization rule is a query that starts with the thing that somebody's trying to do, like I'm trying to create a task or I'm trying to assign a task. So I'm going to start with that fact. And then queries from there back to the set of users that are permitted to do so. And so you can still write an authorization rule even if the user that you end up recording is a predecessor. And so you're just not too concerned about that particular user. So the authorization rule in this case is So for creating a task, we're going to go up to year, month, and then up to supplier. And then we're going to go down both the dispatcher and the worker paths. So, and then from there back up to user. So kind of zigzag through the model to get to those users that are dispatchers or workers for the supplier. And so those users are able to create the task. And that's an independent idea from the user predecessor of the task.
Okay. Good. So then we leave this structure then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe so. And then one other question there is this kind of drives out, do you need that relationship at all? And that is there, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway because this is helpful. Is there something that the application does with that information? Why does the application need to know who it was who created a task or assigned a task?
Well, if there is a discussion, a task that was wrong or that was not well noted, for example, a worker, he has a question about a task. If he can see then that dispatcher in a big company has recorded the task, then he can contact the dispatcher immediately. In a small company, it's easy. There is only one dispatcher, but in the bigger companies, they have multiple dispatchers. So it would be good to know who assigned something and who created something.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. So you're running some kind of an audit report to ask the system who did what. Yes.
Anyway, the idea to have the user as a root, I never thought about it before, but it has some very nice commercial consequences. Because these users, they can be workers who are permanent, hired by the supplier, but they can also be freelancers. And with this model, they could have their own phone, they could get the installation installed, they could log in to the installation, and if we go further with this model, we could add some functionality where the user, a freelancer, would say, okay, I'm available that month, these days. Please publish that to suppliers.
Yeah.
And suppliers, they could say, I'm looking for somebody. Give me the list of users who are available. So we could match the two. And the big advantage is that if the user has already installed my software on his telephone, and he knows the software. So when he's hired for one day by that supplier, no need to get trained, no need to install the software. He will use his own phone, and the supplier only has to get somewhere a list or an email address from the user, and he can just give him permission, make this a worker fact.
Yeah.
So it's much easier than if that is not a root, then it becomes more complicated. So,
yeah, that's true. That is an entirely new business opportunity. And since in the successors there you're capturing information that will go into the invoice, you can actually then roll that into how you get compensated for doing that matchmaking. So yeah, you can say, okay, you have invoiced for this particular worker this particular amount. So by so and so agreement, I take 0.5% of that or whatever.
Who knows? Who knows? I was already happy if a lot of the users there are installing the software, then automatically the suppliers will discover the software.
Yeah.
Because now it's often employees who change from one company to another. who say, hey, I use that in another company. They say, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
And then they call. But okay, that's for next next period.
Yeah, you got me thinking. Okay, reputation system. All right, that's going to be awesome. Okay.
Then, so I split that session started into two. I have unit of work started and unit of work ended. And I have unit of leave started and unit of leave ended. And so the unit of work will point here to type of work. Unit of leave will point to type of leave.
Yeah? Yes.
So leave where I want to work, I'm available, or leave where I'm not available at all. And type of work, I'm working, I'm cleaning, I'm waiting, I'm in training, I'm driving. That's type of work. So a unit of work started is linked to a tool, is linked to consumables, while a unit of leave doesn't have tools, consumables. In common, they have a start time, they have an end time, ended when.
Right.
So in that way, it's completely separated.
Yeah. I like that. That now you can think about what's true and what's false in each of those two different areas, and not try to solve both problems at once. Yeah.
There's only one thing I discovered afterwards, that now the dispatcher is not able to schedule leave he cannot mention in his schedule leave for the worker. But I don't care for the moment. It's not perfect, but I don't care. We just continue, and we will see afterwards how we adapt that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we never get out of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Then the GPS. So everything here came under date. I'm wondering, because in fact you will have two types of devices in the end. You will have a smartphone for a worker, and you will have a PC or a tablet for a dispatcher.
Yeah, the dispatcher, I'm assuming that we don't want to keep GPS coordinates. Is that correct?
No, that is correct. But on top, it might be that at one time I will have the dispatcher software and the worker software running on the same device. Because dispatchers, often in small companies, they do dispatching and they do their worker as well. So if they have to take a tablet for dispatching and a smartphone for registration of the work, it gets complicated. But so I'm wondering, should I have two types of devices, a worker device and a dispatcher device? And then have dispatch point to worker and a smartphone to worker and tablet, for example, to dispatcher? Or is it better to keep them both unified to...
So, yeah, two things kind of factor into that. First of all, the successors of device. So what are we using device for? And so here we've got battery level, we've got GPS, and the ability to request the location. So that's kind of in the GPS realm. And I think that all of that information is really only pertinent to a worker device. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so given that, I would say that what you have for device is truly a worker device, not a dispatcher device at all. And so that's kind of argues for, well, if you need to keep track of dispatcher devices for some reason, like you're licensing the software to those devices, or you need to audit for some reason what device they were using, which might be cluttering up the model a bit too much to do that, then at that point I would say you probably want a separate dispatcher device, but I don't think that you really have a need for a dispatcher device in the model at all. We can just call this a worker device. And then that leads to the second thing. Should it be related to the user or related to the worker? And that kind of goes back to the business model that you were just talking about of the freelancer. A worker is a freelancer's relationship with a specific supplier. So if we bring it down to the worker level, then they would have to somehow tell the software that they are switching their device. Now this belongs to this supplier versus that supplier, which might be an important feature. So if you kind of think through the freelancer carrying around their phone and it's keeping GPS coordinates, they as a freelancer might want to be able to control that today I am working for this particular supplier, so go ahead and track me, but only that supplier can track me. Tomorrow I'll be working for a different supplier, and so only that supplier can track me. I don't want to share my GPS coordinates with all the different suppliers.
No, absolutely.
So given that, then I think that moving device down to worker is a good decision, because then that compartmentalizes all of that GPS data within that supplier.
But
then how do you switch?
Yeah. But so the GPS data will be generated during the time that he's a worker for a certain supplier. But the transmission of the data might appear afterwards. For example, he's working for that supplier until 7 o'clock this evening, and then he's free again. Yeah, and the next day he will be working for somebody else. But he had no internet connection. So he got internet connection when he reached home at 8 o'clock. And then all the data for that worker, for that supplier, is transmitted. But that has nothing to do, I think, with the model itself.
Right, yeah. The model is just concerned with the time of collection, not really with the time of transmission. Yeah.
Okay. So we can just have device point to worker, and then it should be okay.
And that's making me wonder, and this is also a domain question. Does it make sense to move that cluster of GPS and battery tracking down to the assignment level? So, or I'm sorry, the screen just got blurry. Unit of work started, so that when you start work, it starts tracking your GPS coordinates while you're doing that work, and then you end that work and it stops. Is that tying GPS too closely with the unit of work?
I don't think so. Because indeed, actually, even the optimizing of all these GPS points will be in function of this unit of work. Because the moment that they transfer from one unit of work started to the next one, there we need a point. So it's really the segments of the GPS are automatically limited by unit of work start to unit of work ended. And the moment that they are not working, there should be no GPS. If they are in unit of leave, then there should be no GPS at all.
Yeah. And then is there a type of work that represents driving to a client?
Yeah. Driving to a client when it's paid by that supplier.
Right. So the thing that we lose by moving it down is being able to track their position when they're not actually logging that as work. So if that's important, that they're driving to the client, but this client isn't paying for the travel time, so therefore it's not captured as a unit of work, and therefore it's not tracked. And then we can only see their GPS as soon as they start work at the client.
Actually, to me, it looks very normal that if the supplier is not paying the worker, that he has no access to his whereabouts.
Okay, so then this means that that change to the model is actually more in keeping with the intent of the system.
Yeah, because there is even a difference between the workers and the freelancers. A freelancer, he might agree to give the GPS coordinates during the work, but the battery level, I mean, as a freelancer, I don't think an employer has anything to do with the battery level of my phone.
Yeah.
While a worker who is not freelance, he often uses the telephone provided by the boss, and then that gives extra rights. That can be perhaps considered reasonable, but so device, have this unit of work as a success, as a predecessor.
Yes, and then once you do that, you no longer need the year or date clock. So then GPS and battery and everything can go straight to device.
Yeah, because we have this one. Okay.
Yep, that unit of work is already time bound, so you don't need another time boundary.
Okay. Let's see. What is not in this diagram are all these received and seen flags.
Yeah, because that would make it quite messy.
It's very messy if I enable that. Okay. So for the rest, I removed here. Remember, I had the raw and the optimized fact in between here, which was
right. Yes.
So I removed that. The user. So I pointed. Okay, all that we mentioned. Then should device point. That was the first question. That's answered. That's also answered. Complete different thing. How to handle pictures.
Yes. Simple answer: content addressed storage.
Okay. That's in the book.
Yep. On the device, take a hash of the binary of the picture, and now that hash is used as the identifier. And if you want to rescale so that you can save some bandwidth, like you don't need 4 megapixel or whatever the large megapixel is that iPhones can do these days. You don't need that image to be captured ever, so you can scale it down onto the device before you do the hash calculation, and now that is the identity for that image. And so then that would be a separate endpoint that's just a CDN or a document repository that just simply says, okay, I want to post this image with this hash, and then the recipient receives the image, validates the hash, and then stores it if it doesn't already have it. If it does have it, it can actually, because you told it what the hash was in the first place, it can interrupt the upload and say, nope, I already got it. Give you back a 200 or 202, whatever it is. So that would be a separate service apart from the one that's in the model. And so then every time you want a fact to refer to an image, you just simply put the hash in that fact.
Okay. That's a very good idea. Storage address hashes for that.
Yep. Extremely useful pattern. In fact, I haven't yet found just a really simple open source content address storage caching solution. That's if I don't find one that I want to just use everywhere that this problem comes up, then that might be something that I start a new project on as well.
Mm-hmm.
But very useful.
Good. And there was one thing I was thinking about, and it took me a while to finally see how easy it was. Imagine that the worker is making his own task, but no, there is a task, but he wants to add a consumable, and that consumable is not yet in the database. Yeah, I was thinking, what is he going to do then? But actually, it's very easy. He just creates a consumable fact.
Yeah, you can have that created on the device, and then even while you're offline.
It just makes a consumable fact. Perhaps I just should have a flag on the consumable like has been verified or not, so that a worker who creates it, that consumable will not automatically be distributed to all the others to be used, but there will be the dispatcher can verify it before it becomes part of the lookup database.
Right. Yeah. So there could be a successor on consumable that's verify, or I've used the word publish for this kind of pattern before, where it's like here's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to select one and publish it, like a blog post. Put a whole bunch of drafts in there. Okay, that one, publish it. So if that word makes sense in this case, or verify as you used it here.
Because often, for example, the worker, the telephone, just a small screen, he's scrolling through, he doesn't find the correct consumable. He thinks it's not there, so I create it, but actually it was already there. So to avoid that it propagates to his colleagues, there will be a step in between. All right, then, okay. How do we cope with settings? And what I mean, for example, on the dispatcher's view, there will be the map with all the GPS coordinates. Now, every technician, every worker will have his own color. So the dispatcher can set a color per technician. There will be other things. For example, the GPS transmission interval. Is he going to take every second a GPS, every minute, every 5 minutes? These things should be adaptable, so it has to be a setting.
Right.
Do we do that just with a fact, a mutable fact that represents that setting?
Yeah, I have done that in the past. I'm not certain that I'm a fan of doing that anymore. That is kind of a tough one. So ideally, if you're just talking settings, you're talking about something that is true for this one device and is not going to be shared with anybody else. So putting this device in dark mode, that kind of a setting. Then I would say just use whatever mechanism is on that device to store settings. If it's something that participates in the model, like giving each worker a distinct color that shows up on the map, now that's starting to participate with the model, and that's starting to rise above the level of just settings. And in that one, you would also want some consistency from one dispatcher's device to another. So yeah, you really want to store that information within the model. So yeah, in that case, then I would say that yes, you would want to have a mutable property successor for worker that that lets you assign the color, and then that way that would get pushed out to all of the devices. so that everyone would see the same information there. So the idea of how frequently to capture a GPS coordinate is interesting, because that's a setting that you want on the device. So by the first rule, just use whatever device setting. However, it's not something that you want the worker themselves to enter on their phone.
It has to be controlled by the dispatcher, perhaps.
Right. So if it's going to be coming from the dispatcher, then it makes more sense to capture that within the model. And so there I think we'll want to think about, like this change that we just made with device and moving it down. Maybe that was a bit too hasty. Maybe there's a little bit more work that needs to be done there. So the GPS coordinates are within the scope of a unit of work, but device settings are still within the scope of a worker. So that way you don't have to say, okay, for this unit of work, I need you to collect it every minute. For that unit of work, every 5 minutes. That'd be ridiculous. No. But okay, for this worker, I need every 5 minutes. That's a bit more reasonable. And so maybe there's the device concept at that level that captures that particular setting, so that the dispatcher can set it and then the phone receives it.
Because in fact we have 3 types of things in the model. We have 1 is the data, 2 are the settings, and 3 are a kind of commands. For example, what you see here, send location now.
Yes.
Can be considered a command.
Yes.
So there is some overlap between them sometimes, but I think you have 3 categories there.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if send location now. So if there's a device concept that goes down under unit of work, and then there's another device concept that's just under worker. The one under worker is for the commands. So and the settings. So send location now and set the device to capture location at this frequency, and then the one that's down below is capturing the actual GPS coordinates. And so there's a good reason to have a relationship between them. So you've got so maybe a good pair of words are, you've got device for the top level one that's underneath the worker, and then you've got a device session maybe for the thing that's under unit of work, and the device session refers back to device.
Okay, and because we do have a link, if we go over assigned, year, month, then to worker, and then to device session. To device.
Yeah. So in order to so there, anytime, this is a really good just pattern to look for whenever you're doing historical modeling. You followed that path. One of the steps along that path went down, went backwards along an arrow. So that means that query could return multiple results. So now what's the domain reason for that query to have returned multiple results? That worker has multiple devices, and maybe the battery died on this one, they pulled out that one, and they kept going from there. So yeah, even though you would have that route to see all the devices that this worker has, the direct predecessor from the device session up to device would tell you specifically which device they were using at that time when we were capturing these GPS coordinates.
Okay. I will think about it.
Yeah. That was a lot to say without drawing a picture.
No, but it does make sense. Because by having these GPS coordinates under the unit of work, we also solve a little bit the problem of having two devices on at the same time, and both generate the GPS, and where does it come from? So then, so we had the settings. Okay, yeah, that's. Should I have a single fact device diagnostics? Because okay, we have battery level, but there might be a lot of other things that we might potentially want to capture from time to time. There is a technician who calls in, there is something wrong. So I send a command, get device diagnostics, and I get a lot of information back about the device. For example, the Android version, the version of the software installed, the amount of memory available, all these type of things.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Do I capture that in one fact or separate facts?
I think it makes sense for one.
That was my thinking, because it's a thing that happens one time and there is no possible conflict.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly my thinking as well.
Yeah. So start to put it in one fact then.
Right.
Okay.
Some of those things that don't change, that you don't need to, that you would know at time of installation, you might actually want to pull those up and make those properties of device itself. Well, actually, going through the list of things that you just talked about, I can't guarantee that they wouldn't change. Maybe the model of the phone, the model of the phone itself won't change. You can't change the hardware without changing the software. But yeah, you can upgrade the Android version. You can upgrade the software version. So so maybe scratch that, and everything goes into that that one diagnostics fact, like you were saying. Yeah.
And every time we have a new fact, it becomes just a successor of the previous diagnostic fact.
It can just be a direct successor of the device, and you just keep a timestamp
with a timestamp,
which will be the device's local time. So that makes sense.
Okay, great. It's finished.
Yay! All right, we have a complete model.
It will be full of things that can be improved, but that one we will see later.
I have never gone from diagram to code without making changes to the model along the way, and then after shipping, it's like, oh, that should have been different, and I'm always tweaking, and that kind of gets into the discussion that we had many times over on this show, where we talked about how do you evolve the model.
Upgrade.
And in fact, I was just working on the Improving You application, which is our internal training app for Improving, the consulting company I work for, and there was a model change that needed to take place, and so I was like, okay, what's the best way to honor the history that came before, but yet now interpret that history in a new way, and not make the code really complicated in order to do so. Ended up finding a really nice, clean solution that accomplished that. But sometimes that's not always the case, and you have to really migrate the model. But we will definitely.
You didn't have to migrate all the facts to the new model for this one.
No, I did not. And so I'll go into a little bit of detail on what it is that I was working on. So we added a new office to the company. So we acquired an office in Guadalajara, which they have satellite offices in Aguascalientes and in Austin. So this one company that we purchased is actually 3 different offices, but within the application, we've labeled all of the different offices that have an independent coordinator by their location, the city that they're located in. And so at first we said, okay, we're going to call you the Guadalajara office. But then as people started using the application, people in Aguascalientes are getting confused. It's like, oh, where's mine? Yeah, I see Guadalajara. I don't see Aguascalientes. And so we said, okay, we're going to change the name to Nearshore. That's kind of how we've been referring to that part of the organization in other parlance. So we'll say, okay, well, that's going to be our Nearshore office, and people understand what that means when they see it in the list. So now we had all of this history that was associated with Guadalajara that now we needed to associate with Nearshore. And I had made the mistake within the model of using the office name as a natural key, which means it was now part of the identity of those facts, and it couldn't just be changed. So had I instead had an office good and then a mutable property that was the office name, I could just change that and all the history is just fine. But what I ended up doing is, so within the code now, there's it has the capability whenever you select something from the list of offices of giving you back a collection of office catalogs rather than just one. So it says, okay, you've selected the Dallas office. So here's a collection containing just the Dallas office catalog. And so just one little bit of code that says, okay, anytime you select Nearshore, give them back Nearshore and Guadalajara. And so then it's able to display all of the history that was associated with Guadalajara and the new history that's starting to be collected with Nearshore within the same view. So without changing the history at all, I'm able to start collecting history according to the new identity, and then just kind of merge it invisibly.
So you translated the filter, in fact, on the spot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that didn't clutter the code too much, and it preserved that history. But yeah, had I instead said, okay, all of these facts that are associated with Guadalajara, now they have to be associated with Nearshore, then that would have been some service that I put out there that looked for every one of those kinds of successors, and then performed that map and then created the new successor. And then that service, we talked about the authorization related to that kind of a process, in that those facts were already authorized by certain users, and now it's the service that is creating those new facts, not the users that originally created the source facts. And so that service has to impersonate the user that created them in the first time, which in my case is possible because I also have access to the key store. So I've got the private keys and I can use those. But in general, I don't want to assume that that's always going to be the case. So that makes that a little bit tricky.
You have company behind you.
Yeah. Oh, there he is. He's playing with my clock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, get there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think we've got a good start to the model here. So I think that what I would like to do for next week is to start iterating on some tests. And in fact, for improving you, I've started iterating on the authorization first, so that way I can build the authorization model from the top down, and build those authorization rules into the tests, and start to see those take place. And authorization tends to be things at the root of the model, so that they can be used as predecessors. Like you've got user as a predecessor, so it makes sense to put those at the top. So that might be a good exercise for us to go through.
I think I will already prepare for next week some more testing, because we started last time a little bit with it, but I never progressed on that. And then hopefully I get some insight into the working of Jinaga.
Yeah, excellent.
Because I saw on the website jinaga.com, you have a reference of all the comments there, but on the home page there is one comment which is called subscribe. Yeah, subscribing to facts.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, and that one is not in the docs.
Right. And that's because that one is coming soon. Yeah. So yeah, I was documenting. This is the way that I intend for this library to be, and I was like, okay, we need to bring it home. We need to sell it. So yes, you're going to subscribe to a thing, and then it's just going to be pushed to your device. The implementation in the past, I had used WebSockets for the Jinaga, the JavaScript application. In Correspondence, since Correspondence was based on Windows Phone primarily, then it was using push notifications from the platform. But I had found some serious performance problems when relying upon WebSockets, and so I said, okay, I need to take my time with this and make sure that I do this one correctly, and make sure that it's reliable and it's not burning up too much resources. WebSockets are something you want to do carefully. So I actually kind of took that back out of the library. So yeah, right now you can't actually subscribe.
Okay. There are still a lot of comments that I can discover.
Yeah, but yeah, for your use case, you're definitely going to want to be able to subscribe. So we will bring that back before you need to ship something.
No, but we step by step I can discover it, and then we can work on it.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Very good. Oh yeah, and one more thing with the test, I don't remember if we used Jinaga browser.create or Jinaga test.create.
Jinaga test we started with.
Okay, good. In the past I had used Jinaga browser.create, and that was missing some capabilities, like for example being able to test authorization rules. So with Jinaga test.create, you can specify your authorization rules as part of that options object, and then we can start building those authorization rules while we're building the model and writing the tests that this person can do a thing and that person can't.
All right, I will look into it.
Excellent. Yep, that will be a fun session.
Yeah. Okay, unless you still have something.
Nope, I think we are good. We can call this a day.
By the way, there is a very nice new course on Pluralsight by somebody who's called Michael L. Perry about distributed systems.
Yeah, and the guy even refers to my book in the course. I mean, so hey.
Yeah. No, I didn't have the chance to go through it, but I looked to the subjects, and it looks interesting.
Yep. It is. It is not going all the way down these kinds of ideas. It brings some of these ideas in, but really focusing on the tools that people are already used to building distributed systems with, and then applying a little bit of this analysis and theory on top of that in order to use those tools. So yeah, I think it's a good compromise there.
If I saw the content, I had the impression it's a little bit summary of everything, all the small videos you made for YouTube about locality, all these things. And you even mentioned historical modeling in it. So,
Yes, indeed.
All right, Michael, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jan.
And see each other next week then.
Yes, indeed. See you next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.